There are so many things about the user experience that we take for granted as digital natives or near digital natives that are just not intuitive for an OG analog native.
Tips from Trestle is brought to you by eMenu Choice Point of Sale, Wiseox AI, and Benny Keith Food Service. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Today on Tips from Trestle, I'm chatting with the founder and CEO of Odessa Connect, Todd Smith. Prior to founding Odessa Connect, Todd was the director of communications for Signature Healthcare. He is an artist entrepreneur with a background in music, blended with a passion for technology and the startup culture. Entrepreneurship is Todd's second act. Before health tech, Todd enjoyed an extensive career in music as a producer and recording engineer and as a performing and recording artist. Todd, welcome to Tips from Trestle.
Thanks, Aaron. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat because I've had a number of conversations about technology when it comes to the resident experience. I've talked with the food service technology providers. We've even had some resident engagement technology conversations on the podcast. But your take on something, I read an article on LinkedIn that you put together called The Last 5 Feet back in December. And it really caught my attention because it was something I hadn't talked to anybody else about or heard anybody really consider. And so I'd love for you to kind of lay that groundwork for our conversation by explaining the last 5 feet and your philosophy behind that for our listeners.
Sure. Happy to talk about that. It's a subject that we live and breathe here every day. So, the last 5 feet as distinct from the last mile. The last mile is what everyone is focused on and working to solve. In the past, the last mile has been the big problem, right? Just connectivity to the home. How do we get internet connectivity from the cloud to the home? That's the last mile. That could be cell towers, that could be fiber, that could be satellite, a lot of different ways to do it. And it's getting better and it's going to continue to get better. So we're not kind of worried about that, right? The last 5 feet is what happens once you get from inside the walls to the hearts and minds of the user. That's the last 5 feet. And that is really where the rubber meets the road in terms of user engagement and stickiness and providing a valuable experience. The last 5 feet is really where user experience lies. If that is not accounted for in the design process of the upstream technology, then everything upstream could be for nothing. If the last 5 feet are not solved, then you don't really win the user over. And that's what it's all about, right? Is winning that user over. So the last 5 feet is really kind of the not obvious, but just as critical component in the whole chain. And so the last 5 feet has its own unique set of challenges. And that's what we at Odessa Connect are aimed at solving. And that's everything from what type of device are you using to connect to the internet? Is it a small screen? Is it a computer or a tablet? In our case, it's the TV. We use that large screen because our users are older people and they like that big format. But it's also the user interface. So the graphic digital interface that the user sees and what they interact with, that's a big part of the last 5 feet. It's content, it's programming, it's how information is presented. all of this could be filed under the heading of optimization, really, for the older user, optimizing every single thing about that user experience for the older person could be another way of thinking about the last 5 feet.
When you think about the problem of the last 5 feet, how is that different when it comes to age check than maybe how you or I experience it in our homes with our kids and all the various devices that we have?
I think the main answer to that is that we as digital natives, or as close to digital native, I'm Gen X, so I'm not quite a digital native, but close enough. There are so many things about the user experience that we take for granted as digital natives or near digital natives that are just not intuitive for an OG analog native. There's a set of these baseline paradigm factors that we've identified through our journey and through our research. It all comes down to what is intuitive versus what is not intuitive, and what becomes frustrating and challenging for an older person who is an analog native. There's a whole bunch of them. Just things like the concept of back, the concept of undo, the concept of cloud, just the basic concept of everything's living on the cloud. It's not here. The concept of breaking something is an analog worldview paradigm. Like in the analog world, you break something, it's broken. In the digital paradigm, you break something, you Apple Z it, you undo it, you go back. But I mean, we have a lot of our users, we have this little remote control clicker that we give our users, and we have to get them over a little hump of, you can't break it. You cannot click the wrong thing and break something and go beyond repair. It's that concept of beyond repair. There is no undo in the analog world. It's kind of a funny little example, but there's a bunch of them that add up to frustration in that user experience. So we try to identify those and solve for them in the interface, and that's how we get an engaged user.
One of the things that in looking over Odessa Connect's approach was you guys really look at inclusivity and accessibility and really trying to put that at the front. And so when you think about that, how are you thinking about that analog versus digital mindset? How are you bridging the divide for seniors that kind of feel maybe technology isn't designed for them?
Right. Great question. So if you look at the research, overwhelmingly, the older technology users have that feeling, right? Like, I'm trying to use something that wasn't designed for me. I don't relate to it. It's not intuitive. It's not delightful. It's not rewarding. It's just frustrating. It makes me feel maybe dumb, It makes me feel marginalized, like you're building stuff for all these other people, but what about me? I mean, those are terrible feelings, right? Like, who is going to use a product that makes them feel those things? So how we solve that is we want our user to feel like, instead of an afterthought or a never thought, we want them to feel like the only thought. Our system is designed just for you, to the exclusion of everyone else even. It's like so inclusive that this is your playground. This is your happy place. This is where we understand you. We build for you. We're here to support you. I mean, we're all in on that inclusivity for that age group.
I think about the jumps in technology that we've experienced over the last 50, 60 years. And that age group, probably the biggest technological advancement they experienced was the television, right? We went from radio to TV, from audio to video. And that's where you guys live, is on the TV. So when you think about the TV as the interface, what kind of design choices did Odessa Connect use when thinking about using the TV as that primary interface?
Right. Well, we made the same mistake that we see a lot of other age tech companies making in the beginning, which was underestimating the last 5 feet or like not even being aware of the last 5 feet. So we're going in, our early system ran on tablets. It was a web app. You could use it on your computer. And so we would go in to do user testing, and we are based in Louisville, Kentucky. So we have a lot of access to senior care organizations that are based here. So we had ready access to test populations and design partners. And so we would go into a facility, a assisted living community, something like that, with a prototype and test everything. We were almost 2 years into our R&D before we figured out that we needed to be on the TV screen. Like, we were trying tablets, we were trying phones, and because we hadn't figured out that last 5 feet thing yet, it was only through failure and the prototype's not working. We knew the problem was there of connecting the disconnected, bridging the digital divide. We knew that problem was there, but we were a ways into that R&D journey before we figured out that the TV screen was part of the answer, because the things you said, like, it's comfortable, it's familiar, it's universal, it's nothing new, it's nothing techie, it's nothing weird and strange. It's just my TV. So once we figured out TV was the screen, then that kind of unlocked our direction.
Yeah, you showed the remote earlier, and I'm intrigued by that because I've seen the phones where they have the big, massive buttons, and it feels almost Fisher Price like, where your remote doesn't necessarily feel like that. But obviously, you've been very mindful about thinking about maybe some of the physical and cognitive barriers that older adults face. And so, talk a little bit about that piece of the connection too, right? Because that's the other half of the puzzle from what I've seen.
Technology continues to drive changes in senior care, and that includes food service. eMenu Choice is an award-winning point-of-service application for managing the dining function in senior living communities. This mobile, touchscreen-enabled software enhances the dining experience for residents while streamlining processes for staff. The flexibility and functionality of eMenu Choice makes it an effective solution for any type of senior living environment, from independent and assisted living to skilled nursing facilities. It works for production kitchens or restaurant-style service with options for per meal or a la carte pricing, and accommodates a variety of payments, including bill to account, meal credits, and credit cards. Created by a senior care provider with more than a century of experience serving older adults, eMenu Choice eliminates communication barriers between staff and residents while enabling person-centered choices and greater resident satisfaction. eMenu Choice, transforming dining for senior living.
Yes, absolutely. So once we figured out that the TV screen was the screen that we needed to be on, then we're on the next hurdle of, well, how do we interact with the screen? Like, are we right back in the fire? If we ask the patients to use their TV remote, which is impossible,
right?
200 buttons and teeny tiny, and what do they do? And, forget it. So I remember the night I came to the conclusion, I just couldn't get around that. Like, we got to build a remote, that's the only way to go all the way with this. Right.
Yeah.
So we designed the remote that we see all the time in assisted living communities. A resident will have their remote, and most of the buttons are taped up by the family or the staff. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have.
And there's only 6 buttons left, that you can push. Well, that's just what we did. We just took all the other buttons off and we left the ones that you need. And we optimized the shape and the weight and the feel and the colors and the functions for this user. And what we're left with can be programmed to your TVs and your cable box. So it can essentially be used as a universal remote. We had geriatric specialists from multiple disciplines collaborating with us on this. The colors, the feel. I mean, when you click the buttons, you feel it. It's triple feedback. On most normal remotes, the buttons, not only are they tiny, but they're mushy. They're a foam, like this rubber thing, a little micro anxiety. Did I click that? Did I not? And those add up, right?
Yes.
So for our remote is triple feedback. Like you can feel it click. We use a certain kind of switch in there. So it gives a little and you can hear it and you can see it. And some of the function buttons light up. So, you clicked it and there's a little assurance like, okay, I know that I'm in control here.
Yeah. I think about my keyboard. People talk about creamy and quiet keyboards. Like I got to hear the click. I got to hear all of that because it's that feedback that's important. And so
Yeah.
I love the design approach of not just let's figure out how to make a normal remote work, but let's build something that is super functional and takes into consideration all aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the orange, this remote, you can see it from across the room, even if you have macular degeneration, even if you have fine motor skill impairment, you can still use it. Arthritis, you can still use it. Some mild cognitive impairment, you can still use it. So we're trying to take inclusivity and accessibility as far as we possibly can up to the point where if there's advanced cognitive impairment, maybe you're going to struggle with anything. But we take it as far as we possibly can.
We've talked a lot about the hardware aspects of how you're solving for the last 5 feet, but I'm curious to maybe dive in a little bit about your content strategy, right? Because that's just as important. I think about my smart TV and how much I use it for all sorts of things. I'm not just watching TV shows on it. I'm able to access YouTube, other digital content. And so when you think about your content strategy for Odessa Connect, what are you guys doing that helps ensure that you keep them engaged and included and that it's not just that analog versus digital and they feel like they're a part of all of it?
Yeah. So the content and the programming aspect is really a fun topic for me because of, like you said, my background in the music, entertainment business. That's really the fun part. Like solving for delivery is the hard part,
Ah,
and like now that's done. And now we have an open portal in the living room on the big screen. Now we can do content and programming, right? And it's almost like we have a little closed captured network in a way that doesn't depend on other networks or other delivery partners. So we're working on content and programming now, and it's very exciting stuff that we're working on. Up to now, it's been more family and clinical. So like the care team, the community staff, and the family has been more personalized in the portal. And then it's been the users who need to connect with that patient or that resident supplying the content. But I am working on some other types of content, music and video content and even TV stuff and movie stuff. So that's the exciting next level Odessa stuff that's coming.
I did a webinar last year and we called it the community of the future. And we talked about all of these technological advancements, robots and point of sale. But one of the slides talked about that in-room connectivity. And I literally had a photo of a resident talking to their family through their television. And I saw on your website, you guys have a family app that allows family members to engage and connect. And so how important is that kind of connectivity and you being able to provide that for the family members, for not just the residents, but also for the communities you serve in helping them be able to provide the security and the comfort for the family members, for their loved ones?
Yeah, great question. And, the short answer is that family connectivity is critical. It's not just a nice to have, that is a must have. And it's really part of our magic of why Odessa works and why Odessa gets high engagement is because it's not just staff to resident or care team to patient. It's a triangle, it's care team, resident, patient, and family member. We actually go for the resident thinking of their Odessa as a family social portal primarily. We want them to give it family forward. It's like pictures of the grandkids and the video calls and stuff like that. Oh yeah, I had got a message from my doctor, instead of the other way around. And then it becomes sort of one-dimensional and clinical. We want it warm and fuzzy and happy and family. So we're getting in there a few times a day doing family stuff, and then we'll go answer this question from my doctor. So we really need that family. The more the merrier. We have some patients that have 20 plus family members on the app, and we love that, because if you've got 20 family members on the app, you're going to get something every day from somebody. You're going to get a picture. You're going to get a love you, grandma thinking about you. You're going to get a video call. And that's just getting you in the system. That's just sticky.
Yeah. I always think about one of the problems we have to continually try and solve for is, senior living exists to help with the social isolation aspect. But even when somebody moves into a community, I've seen that happen where they become kind of hermits in their room, and they come out for meals, but they don't really like the activities. And so they're there. This kind of feels like it can connect and help solve that social isolation, even if maybe they start out their senior living journey in that frame of mind.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The unfortunate reality on this topic is that a lot of residents don't have active family engagement, right? So what do we do in that case? For the residents that don't have active family engagement, we're actually shopping for a third-party partner to plug into that, whether it be like a volunteer group or a sort of virtual companionship in a way.
Oh, yeah.
Like you might have in the old days, a pen pal. This might be your Odessa pal that visits with you a few times a week and sends you funny puppy videos and stuff like that.
No, I love that. That goes back to how do we bring the social connection to them if they need it? And there's definitely residents that fall into that category of unengaged or lack of family members. They may be there because they don't have family. So as we wrap up here, Todd, I would love for you to share a couple of the big picture lessons that Odessa Connect has learned. You talked about having access to those resident focus groups. And when you think about simplifying technology, what can other age tech companies learn from what you've learned working with those different groups?
I think the biggest thing is just to abandon all of your preconceptions about what a digital interface could look like, because even coming from Signature Healthcare and already being in the aging care world, I had a lot of preconceptions about what that digital interface should look like. And they were almost all of them were wrong. What ended up being true and right and what worked was almost the opposite of what I thought in the beginning. Abandon all preconceptions, let the data tell you what's working. Don't put your biases in there, and just watch the user, listen to the user, and build accordingly.
That's simple yet really great advice. Todd, tell everybody how they can connect with you or learn more about Odessa Connect if they're looking for a solution like you offer.
Yeah, OdessaConnect.tv is our website, and I'm just Todd at OdessaConnect.tv. So hit us up.
Well, Todd, thank you so much. I started as a computer science major in college, and so I still kind of live a little bit in that world. And these conversations are so much fun for me. So I appreciate you taking the time to join me today on Tips from Trestle. So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And at TrestleHospitalityConcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.